Mr. Lavrov, hello. You just got back from a trip and you're going back on a trip while we are in this international isolation, and somehow you're never home. That's an interesting isolation. So thank you for finding the time between your trips to meet up with us. This is a big privilege for Russia Today, Sputnik, and RIA Novosti, for all our resources. I hope that I will be able to ask all my questions, and I will start with something that our social media followers and our audience asked, because we actually did a poll or asked our subscribers what they wanted to ask you, and the most popular question was the following. I will try to reword it. We hold talks, peace talks with Ukraine, or we don't hold talks with Ukraine. Sometimes we say that it's impossible. Sometimes we say that it's necessary. And I'm saying we at different levels. And my subscribers are interested to find out. And actually, I want to ask you too, does it make any sense at all? Or is it just like some decorum?
Under current conditions, it doesn't make any sense. Yesterday, the president, after talks with the leaders of Iran and Turkey during the press conference late in the night, after all the meetings were over, he spoke about that, and he reminded once again that when in the very beginning of the military special operation, Ukrainian leadership asked to launch negotiations, we didn't refuse. We were honest and open to this process, and first rounds of talks that took place in Belarus, they showed that Ukrainian party had no desire to discuss anything in earnest. And then we handed them over our estimates and said, if you want to work seriously, then give us something on paper so that we could understand about which agreements you want to speak. And they gave us a paper that we supported. And yesterday, President reminded about that. We were ready to take their principles as the basis and to sign a document that was drafted based on their vision of the situation. And in April, we had this document, and that was the end of it. We never heard from them anything else. We hear from Schultz, and Boris Johnson used to speak about that. He doesn't speak about that anymore. And Ms. von der Leyen and Borrell, the chief diplomat, that Ukraine should be victorious on the battlefield, that Ukraine should not participate in the negotiations because their position at the front line is weak. And first, Ukraine should fix that, change that. They should dominate over the Russian armed forces, over Donetsk and Lugansk militias. And only then, when they have stronger hand, they should start negotiations. But it means nothing, basically, because if
they can't do that anymore. Because Ukraine won't be able to do that. What do you mean by this poor man's job?
Both. They would not succeed, and they will not be able to put anything significant that deserves any attention from any serious officials. And what keeps them from any constructive steps, what literally, they are not just pumped with weapons, they are forced to use these weapons in riskier way, increasingly riskier way, that foreign instructors and servicemen are sitting there working with all those weapons, HIMARS and the others. It's not a secret anymore. Even though our American counterparts, British counterparts, well, Anglo-Saxon think with active support from Germans and Polish and Baltic states, they really want to turn this war into real war and to start a confrontation between Russia and European states. It's advantageous for US, for the UK. They are sitting behind the ocean, they are far away, and it is European economy that suffered the most. There were data that 40% suffers from sanctions from the EU, and Americans suffer less than 1%. We took at the look at the comprehensive negative outcomes of those sanctions and restrictions. So here I have no doubt that Ukrainians will not be allowed to partake in any negotiations until the Americans will think that, well, enough. with this, enough with this chaos. Now we can let them do their things, and we will see what they will do about it.
Do you think it's possible, this plan, the big war plan, as you called it, this conflict between Russia and Europe, because that means nuclear war? Do you think that's possible at all?
Americans, they don't really think about it. So the guys who hold office now in the U.S., they are quite ambitious, and they want to achieve some new heights in their careers, in their jobs. I don't know how they will try to achieve these goals within this administration, but they are acting, well, irresponsibly, I would say, and the plans and they make, they're building, so they really have some risks, and we would tell them that, but they do not want to talk to us. We don't want to run after them. So we used to have dialogue, and it was useful. At least we could look each other in the eye and explain our positions. But they interrupted it after the launch of the special military operation. But the fact that they are playing a very dangerous game, I don't think they understand it themselves. But in Europe, a lot of people start to understand that.
Of course. They are not thinking about it. But what do we think? Is it possible? Is this nuclear conflict between Russia and Europe, is it possible?
We initiated a lot of statements, 5 Security Council permanent members, that there could be no victor in the nuclear war. It could never be started. This is our stance, and we are going to stand firmly on this stance. And we also have our doctrine that clearly stipulates what could be the case when we would be forced to use nuclear weapons, and our partners, counterparts, rivals, as they probably consider themselves. So
they say foes. That's what they call us now. Of course, obviously, we consider Zelensky as a legitimate representative of Ukraine. I always wanted to ask you, but why? Because we said so many times, and that's justified, that's what's happening in Ukraine right now. It's the result of the coup d'etat that happened, well, maybe not under Zelensky, before Zelensky, but Zelensky became president because of all those events. Why did we recognize all of that?
Recently, when Macron, and he had probably his own ideas of the backroom when he did that, when he put it out in the open, the phone conversations that took place early February with Putin. And so you can hear clearly Putin there when Macron tries to convince him not to delve too deep into fulfilling the Minsk Accords, what Donetsk, what Lugansk, so they're legitimate. You need to work within the context of those interpretations that we are suggesting, so that Russia and Ukraine found an agreement, and Zelensky, he wants that. And Putin told them that Zelensky is the outcome of a coup d'etat.
That's true.
And this regime didn't go anywhere. If you remember how things unfolded after the coup, first of all, Germany, French, and Poland, so those who perpetrated the coup, they spit in their faces because they were the guarantors of those agreements. The very next morning, these agreements were forgotten, and they accepted what happened. And a couple of years ago, I asked the Germans and French guys, so what about the coup? So how do you see it? What do you think about it if you didn't demand from the putschists to fulfill these agreements? And they were saying, well, that's what happens with democracy sometimes. And these are adults who are holding high positions in their governments. But after this coup took place, after Crimeans and people from the east of Ukraine refused to recognize this coup in Crimea at all, and it with the referendum about reunification with Russia in Donbass, it ended with the refusal to talk to the central government, central leadership, and new legitimate government launched this war. And then Poroshenko ran for president. There was a general election in May in France, Germany, Hollande, Merkel, other European leaders. They were basically begging Putin not to say beforehand that he was not going to recognize the outcomes of the elections. And Putin said back then that since Poroshenko is running with the peace slogans, that he wants to stop the war, that he wants to restore the rights of all Ukrainians, including those who live in Donbass, we didn't have anything against the legitimacy of that process, of those elections. But as it turned out, Poroshenko immediately forgot about all his campaign promises about his electorate. So he lied to them and to his Western curators, and he started the new round of war that was very hard to stop in February 2015. It took a lot of effort to stop it, and the Minsk agreements were signed, and Poroshenko said recently that he was never going to fulfill them. He just signed them to muster up some strength, economic strength and military strength to conquer back the lands. That's why he signed Minsk agreements.
Didn't we understand that when he was signing those?
If you ask for my perception, I hope that he still has some good conscience on him, but it could only mean one thing, that he is now admitting about his true feelings, about his true plans, that he was never going to implement the document that was endorsed by the Security Council of the UN. And once again, openly in the public, he reaffirmed that he was not a legitimate president because he didn't think about international law. And Zelensky, who came to power, once again, he came to power using promises to establish peace, that he wants to achieve peace and calm in Ukraine, and that all citizens of Ukraine, if they want to speak Russian, they should speak Russian. No one is going to bully them, bother them. No one is going to discriminate against them. Now look at what he's speaking now. So he was the next door guy, like a teacher, a person from the people, and he defeated all those oligarchs, and he finally paid out every debt to the International Fund, and now everyone was free, and the corrupted parliament was disrupted by him. And he was always emphasizing, and there are videos, there are footage of those statements. You cannot hide from that. He was defending the rights of Russian culture, of Russian language.
He's an actor, Mr. Lavrov. He is an actor.
He is an actor, so it's easy for him to change opinions, to change heart. But what he said this autumn when he was asked, what do you think about the people who live in Donbass? He said, you know, there are people and there are species. That's, I'm quoting him, Mr. Zelensky now. And he was the one who said that if anyone feels Russian, then for the sake of their children, of their grandchildren, they should leave for Russia. That was literally what Dmitry Yarosh said the very next day after coup d'etat in February 2014. Russians will never think in Ukrainian, they will never speak Ukrainian, they will never honor our heroes. Russians should go away from Crimea. So I think it's some kind of a national code. I'm speaking about this elite who assumed office. It's in their DNA. There was Yatsenyuk in between Yarosh, Poroshenko, and Zelensky, who directly called people in Donbass inhuman, non-human.
Remember, Poroshenko said, our children will go to school and your children will sit in the basement. He told it to his people, the people that he considered his people.
And now they're saying that they will liberate our lands.
Yes, but without the people.
I don't know how they will communicate to those people. They will start
What
an uprising.
people? They're just going to kill all of them with the HIMARS from America. I was hoping that they had some conscience, but not everyone is like us. If you have that, it doesn't mean that all of our so-called partners with the same level of consciousness. And Maria Zahar and I just discussed our partners, and we of course made jokes because it's hard not to say those jokes, like Biden's latest statement, and all we know about this new one is that she's gay, she's lesbian. That's all she said when she took the new office, and that's the only valuable thing about her, and that's all she wants us to know about her. And when asked what Biden was doing for 2 days, she said, well, he was thinking about the American people. Well, the Western leaders are just all stepping down. Many of them are stepping down. And many of them are showing signs of, well, I'm a woman, so I can't really say the exact words. You will probably say it better. They are showing signs of limited intelligence, I guess. They don't look adequate enough. Maybe those who will replace them will be more adequate. What do you think?
We can describe it differently. We can say that the political class that is growing now in the West, they are with restricted adequacy. So they are adequate in their own eyes, but they are restricted from the point of view of political experience, from their field of vision, from their knowledge.
Why is that?
I don't know why it's that, but a lot of people notice that.
Everybody sees that. That's impossible not to notice.
And Henry Kissinger was talking about that. He remembered Schroeder and Chirac, and, well, not in a rude way, but he made it clear that there is a strong contrast. So this average attitude towards political processes, and that we should elect people who are clear, who will use very simple things to talk about. So now they have this green transition because everyone is choking, everyone is going to die, dolphins, fish will disappear, and the people will left alone in the desert. So now they have this green transition, and President Putin spoke about it, how they were building it, escalating it in their policies. And it was a great failure because they didn't really think it through. As for adequacy, well, I don't know why it's happening, but the lack of really flamboyant, bright leaders, so it's something really convenient for them. Democrats, I guess.
Rothschilds, Rockefellers, or who?
So the European Commission, 60,000 of them, that's a lot. They become a thing in itself. Poland and Hungary, they are asking question now. Why do we have to listen to these people, including regarding those areas where we never let them make decisions for us?
So it's the American-type deep state in Europe.
And they are not that deep, so they're elite, European Commission.
So like shallow state, really.
That's right. That's what it is. And so this pendulum is swinging from one side to the other, and this pendulum is on the side that was associated with the past integration. Now it is going to swing to the other side when demands imposed by Brussels, like I said, they are not always based on some legal, lawful agreement, so they start to irritate, they start to stand in the way for the nations to build their internal policies in accordance with their traditions, their politics. So now they are bothering Hungarians about propagating the non-traditional values. But they don't want to, like we don't want to, many others don't want to. But the European Commission starts to demand to change their stance, or we won't fund you, won't allocate any funds to you. That was already agreed upon. And I think that it's sad for the European Union.
But it's a happy thing for us? It's a good thing for us?
I don't think it is. So we should not be gladdened about people in Europe living in poor conditions.
Of course, we don't want them to freeze to death, but maybe if they get sick of all the impositions, maybe good things will happen and national politicians will come to power who will want to have good relations with Russia, because it doesn't benefit anyone to have conflicts with Russia.
Well, I guess it's a healthy process when people get rid of illusions that Brussels is going to make every decision for them. It is going to be the same thing every day, cheap energy, cheap food, everything is going to be, well, I guess it has to be done for the sake of Europe itself, for the sake of the nations that inhabit Europe. But how it is going to happen, I don't know. We are not going to be glad. I don't think we are going to be much concerned about this. I think we just need to take position on the side. So you chose this, you want to live in these conditions, you want to get rid of those ties, natural ties, advantageous ties that were built for decades in energy and logistics and supply chains and transport communications. Well, it is up to you. We are not going to impose ourselves on you. But when you will complete this process, if you would be able to complete it with a profit for yourself, which is impossible, it will cost you dearly for future development of European economy, then please don't ask us to return back to any agreements, because you proved that you are unreliable and we can't make any strategic investments considering the development of our country and the development of its external ties. We cannot plan ahead based on with such partners. We are going to have different partners, and we always had them in the East, in the South, and other continents. But now when the share of the West in our external economic ties has drastically decreased, the share of other partners will increase. And as for those trends that we can see now in Europe, it is also irresponsible from the point of view of explaining the reasons to the people why this crisis is happening. Scholz is saying that I have no doubt that Russia wants to restrict gas supply along the Nord Stream due to the political reasons, not due to the technical reasons. So he has no doubts. Even though the facts that we were naming a lot of times, and the president talked about this, and they show that Europe systematically, consistently decreased the capacity of Nord Stream 1, and then so they left Nord Stream 2 pending, and they were introducing restrictions on using Nord Stream after all the investments have been made. And the rules cannot be changed, investment rules cannot be changed at that stage. But the European Commission insisted, and they did that. Instead of 100% of the pipeline capacity, they restricted the pipeline with half of its volume. And there were a lot of other things. And speaking about any accusations, now we are blamed for using hunger as a weapon, or Sullivan Relain is doing that.
So hunger, starvation, and cold. So just general frost, and now we have the general wheat and central heating.
U.S. Secretary of Treasury said recently that the U.S. will not allow Russia, China, or anyone else to change international economic rules that were approved by everyone.
They just like saying all those like really big words.
And then they said that we would not allow Russia to use economic integration processes as a weapon. I think that's really going very far. So it beats every other things that they used to say. But that's them agonizing because they have no other explanations for their
Very
failures.
true. You mentioned green energy and the transition, and you said that some Eastern European countries are not happy about some parts of the Western agenda, like gender rights, gender minorities, and things like that. Well, you're a very experienced politician, and maybe some things are more clear to you. We're not experts. You said that they come up with this agenda. They thought of the green energy and Me Too and the multiple genders and the gay rights. They now have some issues with math because minorities can't study math. They can't call mothers mothers, or breast milk, they can't say breast milk anymore. So people are asking these questions. So what's the idea behind it? Because everybody thinks that somebody's behind it and this benefits someone, but we can't figure out who benefits from this. What do you think? Who is behind this?
If we speak about what's accessible to us, we can't get in their shoes and understand why they're doing this. It's impossible to understand why, if a person has any tendencies, why shouldn't he or she be left alone with that and let them do that on their own? Why should it become a banner, a slogan of any movement?
Why president's press secretary, newly appointed press secretary, says, I'm black and I'm lesbian, period. That's it.
The only thing, and I'm not the one who came up with that because I'm reading a lot, and I'm also interested in how the Western ideas, philosophies are evolving. So, and some people say that golden billion or whatever they have in this golden billion who are making all these decisions, they want to make the population of the earth less because we would not have enough for everyone, as our famous humorist, Zhevanetsky used to say. And he also used to say that there should be fewer of us. But he was saying that in the Soviet Union times when we had shortage of food, of some commodities, so he was making jokes about that. But one of the explanations that I, read in some Western sources, that's exactly it.
It makes sense. Well, sorry, it doesn't really make sense because they are actually making sure that it's this way. It's Africa and Nigeria, they're growing, but that golden billion is actually shrinking. By the time they get there, look at the Hollywood actors. Everybody now has a transgender child or a non-binary child. So they're starting with themselves.
Well, maybe it's part of their plan to share less. I don't know. I said that I couldn't explain that clearly and sensibly, but one of the versions, I guess it's some kind of conspiracy theory, so I just told you about that.
Well, before the special military operation and now, many think that they won't be able to manage without us. And we now see that they're actually going back on some of the sanctions. The new sanctions that they just passed, what was it? Was that new sanctions? Did they roll out new sanctions, or did they actually cancel some of the previous ones? But what if they can live and solve all the problems without us? Can they live without our energy? Maybe not next winter, but the winter after that, if they stop using Nord Stream 1, never start using Nord Stream 2, is that a possibility? What do you think about that possibility?
As for the next sanctions package, what are those sanctions or lifting sanctions? So it's both, because they have no more means to deal any damage to us, and now they have to think about what they have done and what's the impact on them. So now finally they have started considering that. So that's why they introduced some clarifications, the way I see it, that allowed them to serve as the Russian food experts. For months, they have been saying that we were the one to be blamed for a food crisis and that food, like fertilizers, are not sanctioned against. So Russia stopped trying to get out of that, so sell your food. And we were saying that, yes, food and fertilizers are not sanctioned, but insurance, shipping, our vessels that are supposed to enter foreign ports, and foreign vessels that are supposed to enter Russian ports to carry those commodities. That was sanctioned almost right away.
So facilitating the process.
So when they're lying to us, saying that we're not the ones who did that, it's up to you, so still they want to drag the Secretary General of the UN into their games. When he got really worried about food crisis, he came to Moscow, he met Putin, and he suggested a package deal. So there is a Russian grain that has to be freed from those artificial illegitimate restrictions that I've mentioned, and there is Ukrainian grain that should be demined. And he suggested a package deal. So, okay, Guterres, will make the U.S. to lift all the impediments on the path of your grain, and you will agree with Turkey and others to demine the Black Sea to allow the grains out. And we said, well, they can demine the Black Sea without us, but if you want to, we are ready. And he was promoting this package deal, and our colleagues last week went to Istanbul to agree on how this might work, and they agreed on some basic principles in accordance with which the Ukrainian grain will be exported. And when our delegation reminded about the second part of this package deal, so let's speak about that, Ukrainians refused categorically, and the UN delegations, they were modestly keeping silence. And yesterday we sent a message to the UN Secretary General. So what's happening? It was your initiative. So let's first deal with the Ukrainian part, and then we will deal with the Russian part. But that's so just wrong that people, so dishonest for people who are involved in the high-level politics. I'm sure that the Secretary General is under huge pressure from the US, from the UK, who are sitting in the Secretariat around him, holding positions of the deputies. And they have privatized, basically, this structure, and they use it in their interest, which is sad.
What is the technical side of things? How do they go about applying this pressure? What are they doing? Just explain it to regular people.
I don't think they use some personal blackmailing, because when ambassadors are voting during the General Assembly, they approach them and they say, we introduced the resolution against Russia. Don't forget that you have a bank account in Manhattan and your daughter is going to Stanford.
Well, that's something similar.
I think here they are not that open about that. But most of the employees in the UN are from the West, because the number of the Secretariat officials. So it depends on the fees that you pay, contributions that you make. And in a lot of cases, they are not as neutral as it's stipulated in the UN Charter, in the provisions on the Secretariat. But that's life. I'm just stating it. That's how it has always been.
How they apply pressure.
Yeah, well, the first question, how do they apply pressure?
About Nord Stream, what if they are able to say no to all of that, just hypothetically speaking?
I think they are now torn between this desire to not to show in any way that they made a mistake, and the ruling elites, they will do it with every way they can because they have no other way, basically. And the opposition, and in Austria, so they're raising their voices now. There is the Austrian Freedom Party that is not really welcome in Brussels, but it exists. And in other countries, there is opposing voices that are asking, why are we doing that? Why can't we find a compromise? And many people have this question because there is no perception in the developing countries that, well, yes, Russia crossed some red line. because they remember what Americans did in Iraq, what they did in Afghanistan, what they did in Libya, in Syria, in Yugoslavia in 1999. With no warnings, with no saying that American interests are harmed, let's do something about it.
No 8 years of attempts to find a peaceful solution.
Tens of thousands of kilometers from the American shores, they were bombing these countries, leveling, razing to the ground all these cities, and no one in Europe even said how bad it is.
Without having to protect Americans living in those territories.
And that's right. And in our case, it's different. It's an actual threat, not some made-up threat to spread your imperialistic tentacles over the ocean. And we've been saying that for years. Don't turn Ukraine into anti-Russia. Don't put NATO into there to create direct military threat to our security. And so coming back to this question about Europe, if all of a sudden, I don't think that it's in their interest to stop all ties with us, to cut off all the ties with us, and to use liquefied natural gas that the Americans are trying to sell them.
Make them take it.
I was thinking about the worst word, but okay, let's call it that. So, some serious experts, researchers, are saying that economic welfare of Germany was tied to accessible, cheap Russian energy. And if they will change it to LNG, well, yes, it's a more flexible commodity because, well, pipeline is laid where it's laid, so you can only get it from there, buy it from there. And LNG, you can sell it anywhere. But when in Asia the demand was higher, Americans were selling LNG there because they got more money for that. So it doesn't only have to do with higher prices, but also about shortage that could emerge at any time. And if they do that, then we would have no problem. The president said that due to what they do with the Nord Stream 2, we are ready to launch it, so there is pressure in the pipeline, but 50% of the capacity of the volume of the pipeline that were planned, so we now use them for internal consumption, for heating, for chemical industry, and for other industrial goals. We are going to reorient this with no significant problems for ourselves. We have buyers, we have demand, and inside the country we also want to develop chemical industry and gasify.
And thousands of towns and villages that don't have gas.
So it will be up to them. It will be their choice. And we should not, and no one is trying, thank God, to build any schemes that are based on the possible or probable or any desire to go back to the situation that we had half a year ago when all those supply chains could be rebuilt again. No, these chains, the way I see it, they should be stopped, and we should build new ones that would be reliable. That's what we are doing now, this corridor north-south from St. Petersburg to the Indian Ocean, from India to Vladivostok. There are a number of projects that are now being implemented. If at some point Europe all of a sudden says, okay, guys, so we got carried away, we are interested in some economic trade relations, let's restore these ties. I think if that's the case, then we should not push them away. We should just see at how profitable it would be for us.
Of course, they already ditched us once. They will ditch us again. We still have time. You talked about diversification of our partnerships. We spoke about China and India, and now you're flying south to Africa. What are you going to do there? If you can share that, maybe in a few words, but say in a nutshell what you're going to do and what you expect from that visit.
We have good relations with Africa since Soviet times. The Soviet Union was leading this movement of decolonization. We were supporting in their struggle for freedom. Then we helped them to build independent nations, to build their economies. Hundreds of enterprises were built that now serve as the basis of the foundation of the economies of the African nations, a lot of African nations. And we are leading this movement to make this decolonization as an inherent part of international law, of international life. Then there was a period when the Soviet Union was, well, collapsing. There was the Russian Federation that emerged. There were urgent problems, not in Africa, but much closer, first of all, inside the Russian Federation. But for many years now, we have been restoring our presence. Africans are reciprocating, so we never taught them anything. We've never forced them to do anything. We always helped them to resolve the tasks and to live in their countries the way they wanted.
Well, they do think that we taught them, but in a good way. We didn't lecture them.
We were helping them to achieve goals that they were setting for themselves. We were never saying, don't be friends with America or anyone else.
Yes, we didn't lecture them.
We do not lecture them, unlike Americans who travel across Africa and they say, don't talk to Russians, don't talk to Chinese, because they have their own agenda, even if they build trade ties with you. And we always had mutual visits. Once a year or once 2 years, foreign minister visits African countries. We are trying to plan it in this way to cover as many countries as possible within a period of 2 or 3 years. This year there will be Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Republic of Congo. In all these countries, we have good traditions, we have good economic relations. Egypt is our partner number one in Africa. It's about $5 billion, the trade turnover. We are building the first nuclear power plant, and we're creating Russian industrial zones at the Suez Channel. And it is becoming even more promising within the context that of the decision that was made last year by the African Union about creating the free trade zone on the continent. So the decision has been made already, so now it will take some time to agree on details, on fees, on tariffs that will be used within this zone. But for Russia, as an emerging, growing partner of Africa, it could be profitable, beneficial to increase our trade turnover and investment volumes. But we have modest figures in comparison with the US, with China, with the European Union. And in this sense, we should work with our partners, with our colleagues, work on the second summit of Russia-Africa. The first one took place in Sochi in 2019. We plan the next one to take place next year.
In Odessa, right? For example.
Well, I guess not in Odessa. We will announce it at a later stage. But at the same time, we are going to hold roundtables on trade, on energy, on cybersecurity, on agriculture, on nuclear power, economic forum. We should increase the volumes of mutual trade because we're speaking about 1.4 billion people in Africa and China, India. It's a powerful part of the modern world, and I guess it is the most promising market there is. So, long-term campaign and the states that look into the future, they are building long-term strategy in regard to Africa because it is the continent of the future. And once again, we have great political foundation of our relations, and we have a good understanding because thousands of Africans were going to our colleges. They go to our colleges now, then they assume offices in their governments. So we need to use this human capital, political capital. We should turn it into economy.
What can you say about our relations with, well, with our former or exes? I guess exes are rarely friends, but do we have any true friends among our exes, including Belarus? What's happening in our relations with Kazakhstan? Because we receive different signals from there. Do you feel like in some things, and even the fact that I have to ask this question, do you think that it means that some of that is our fault? We just sort of ignore them and let them drift away towards Europe, America, or maybe even Turkey?
There was a period after the Soviet Union had collapsed when we had those agreements from Belaruskaya Pusha, those states that were not invited there, so they were really hurt by this decision, and I can understand them. Then we tried to fix this situation, to smooth it out, so to say. Before the end of the 1991 in Almaty, we held a special summit, but still, so there were some bad blood, kind of. But first of all, well, that was an event, and then some processes followed, and after everyone got independent and sovereign, our leadership, they didn't pay a lot of attention to not to allow some kind of falling out with our close neighbors, close allies, close partners with millennial history of coexisting. Why I remember that? Because I was Deputy Foreign Minister in 1992 to 1994 until I moved to New York. And I was in charge of international organizations, and at some stage, Mr. Kozyrev asked me he put me in charge of the CIS. So I didn't do that for a lot of time, but the situation was not really bright for us. Because, well, obviously it was not the foreign ministry that made the decision about building policies in this regard, so the president's administration was making this decision. Everyone thought, where would they go? Because we were always living together and we speak the same language and we went to same schools and we shared same tastes. So, okay, we will live as we live now. An economy, so it was so intertwined. It has become so intertwined in those centuries even. But the West was not idle. If you look now at Central Asia, how many forums they have there? Central Asia plus someone. I'm speaking about plus the US, plus the EU, plus Japan, plus China, plus Turkey, plus India. Well, and plus Russia too, because despite having CIS, Eurasian Economy Union, and the CSTO, we didn't have an organization with all 5 Central Asian countries and Russia together. Now we have one. And I'm not only talking about the foreign policy agencies, I'm talking about economic agencies, and water resource, energy policies, everything was done from one centralized point. And now our Western partners, as we call them sometimes, the EU and the US, they want to enter all those areas. They suggest their own programs to change those systems, to adapt those systems to those external actors, all those processes that are now being built in energy and water usage that still use a lot of the Soviet legacy facilities and infrastructure. And we are suggesting our partners, and it's only natural, but the West is trying to interfere with this natural process, to enter it from the outside, to interfere with our relations with the Axis. Andrei Voznesensky, a poet, said that don't go back to your ex-lovers. That's the beginning of that poem, but it ends with that you still have no one else to go to.
Vera Polaskova is a very popular poet. She's friends with all her exes, like they never betrayed her. Judging by what you said and what we all keep saying, and the foreign ministry said before the special military operation, you didn't really know about it, at least ahead of time. You didn't really get much notice. Well, that's what it looked like. May I ask you, how did you find out about it and what did you feel? Because I remember what Tigran and I felt when we found out about it, and it would be, could you share what you felt? And what do you think about the so-called scared patriots who left and they're embarrassed and they're in different countries now?
It's about when I learned
So
about
that's not a
that.
state secret.
It's not a state secret, but I would not want to delve into that, if you permit. As for feelings that I had when it was announced, so it was something unavoidable. Well, I didn't feel happy. Well, it's hard to be happy when there is some hostilities and the citizens of your country are risking their lives to defend justice. But the feeling that it was unavoidable, and some sense of relief, because for years we could not answer the questions from those people from Donbass and from Russia.
Yes, 100%.
For how long we will tolerate them making fun of the UN Charter, of all the accords that was sabotaged openly?
And what do you think about those who are embarrassed about their nationality, that they're Russians?
So there are a lot of debates now about foreign agents. Was it right to introduce this new law that someone deems covering too much an umbrella law, and they're asking if it's right or wrong to do this law? And I'm watching a lot of television, and including with your participation, when people are debating, say, okay, these people left, what we should do about them. If they return, how should we treat them? Should they be allowed in? I don't have my point of view on this. Every person is the master of their own destiny, but every person should also have conscience, and so they should live with this conscience somehow, coexist with this conscience somehow. So that's the assumption I'm coming from, but there is something I cannot accept. Some publications, well, I have to read them because that's my job. I have to read some outlets that are called foreign agents, declared foreign agents in Russia. And you can see how much they enjoy describing the problems that the Russian Federation is facing now, how they enjoy.
They are just happy about all the problems.
How much they're gloating on predicting the collapse of Russia. And they're saying that in high technology area, Russia will die out because Russia has no brains, has no organization, no structure. That's what they're writing about their own country. And some other people, they are exercising. When Roscosmos replied to the sanctions and they told Americans, well, okay, lads, if you don't want to work with us, we are not going to give you the engine, and we will not going to give the engine to the UK because the Roscosmos is sanctioned, well, then they should have no contact with Roscosmos. And one of those foreign agent websites wrote that Roscosmos is violating all possible obligations, so they are an unreliable partner. No one's going to deal with them anymore. So we are talking about double standards, but, well, here you are. You don't even need to look at anywhere. It's not that complicated. It's right out there in the open. So, and I believe that these people should just look outside themselves and understand themselves, and about how people will treat them, their acquaintances, their friends. Well, they talk to them. If the state will work with them, that's a different matter. But the main thing, they should be with their own conscience by themselves.
Your belief in the fact that everybody has a conscience, it already failed you once with Poroshenko and the Minsk agreements. Not everybody can boast conscience, but I do have it. So I was asked to stay within the time limits of this interview. So I am going to ask the final questions. So, of course, everybody in Russia is thinking about some end. We all want the special operation to end as soon as possible because we don't want our soldiers to be killed there, and civilians who are also experiencing horrors. And Ukraine thinks of them as of their citizens, but is still bombing them. We don't know when this is going to end, and I'm not going to ask you because I know that you're not going to be able to answer this question. But what do you think? Where do you think it should stop? It should end? And we're not talking about President Putin talking about demilitarization and denazification as the ultimate objectives of this operation. But geographically, where should we stop? Where would it be good for us to stop?
First of all, about the timelines, I remembered one interesting, curious fact. Recently, Kuleba, foreign minister of Ukraine, said that Zelensky defined a deadline of joining the European Union, but I'm not going to tell you this deadline, said Kuleba, because a lot of people in the European Union will be frightened and they will start to put impediments.
I saw that. That was really funny.
That's why we don't have any deadlines either. As for the special military operation and geography of this operation, President said it clearly, and you quoted him: denazification, demilitarization, in the sense of not having any threats emanating to our security from the territory of Ukraine. And it is still our goal. And you know, when in Istanbul, the negotiators met, so they were talking about one geography, and our willingness to accept Ukrainian suggestions was based on that geography of the end of March of 2022.
So Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, more or less.
Well, more or less in this vein. Now geography is different. We're not talking all about DPR, LPR. We are talking about the Kherson region, the Zaporozhye region, a number of other territories, and this process is ongoing. And it is going on consistently, permanently. And if the West that is trying to exacerbate situation in their impotent anger, they are pumping Ukraine with their weapons, with HIMARS. Now they are getting 300-kilometer range shells. So it means that we will have to push this line away even further, because we cannot allow to have the Ukrainian-controlled territory controlled by Zelensky or by anyone who is going to replace them. We cannot allow them to have weapons that would pose a direct threat to the territory of the Russian Federation and to the territory of those republics who declared their independence and who want to think about their future by themselves.
How is it possible? Okay, this is our territory. This is the republics that will join us, and they already joined us. You're a diplomat, you can't really say that, but I'm a journalist, I can say it. They already joined us. Now territories controlled by Zelensky, but there's like a line between them. So is there going to be like a buffer zone between them, or what's going to happen?
There is a solution, and the military know the solution.
It's a secret, right? Is there a chance that we will leave without finishing the job? All our viewers and subscribers are concerned about that.
I see no reason to put under any doubt what President announced on February 24th and what he reaffirmed just a few days ago, that the goals are still the same and they will be fulfilled.
Thank you again, Mr. Lavrov. And the first thing that everybody wrote when I announced this about this interview, everybody told me that stay courageous, be patient, and they wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.